What's up, chat? Welcome back to the stream. It's Wednesday. The Warhamster. Oh, where's our Warhamster at? Oh, he's not here right now. He's on the other. He's on the other scene. The Warhamster has brought us a great bounty of silly threads from the online annals of Warhammer 40,000. Welcome in, everyone. We have some interesting ones to talk about. Some pretty wild discussion threads, as well as a little bit of opinion pieces on 10th edition Warhammer 40k that I think we can sort of discuss amongst ourselves in chat, as well as a little bit of maybe a dash of good old-fashioned gamer superstition, one of my favorite kinds. And yeah, let's go ahead and hop in. It's apologies if things are a little late this morning. Or this afternoon, I guess. I was basically spent the entire morning trying to rework my entire streaming setup. It was a lot of work. I don't think I really got very far with it. So, unfortunately, we didn't get much value out of the stuff I was doing. But hopefully, it means that my streams this weekend will go smoothly. Is the idea. So, I'm still setting up the new streaming rig for IRL streaming, and still have some new equipment coming in to get replaced and stuff. So, it's a whole thing. Anyway, let's hop in and talk about some threads. It's threads time. This one comes from the regular Warhammer 40k subreddit, the big one, the big sub, I guess. And I thought it was really interesting because I saw this. It's a little salty, I think. And however, I don't wholly disagree with it, but also I don't wholly agree with. I kind of like agree with some of the conclusions that the OP makes, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with their reason, like their rationale for the arriving at that decision. And it comes about talking about 10th edition and sort of its design. Obsidianix. Also, this thread's been locked, by the way. Things got very heated, I guess. And the mods at the 40k subreddit were like, nope. No more discussion about game design, I guess. Playing quite a few games lately, and 40k feels very flat and uninspired. Power creep seems to feel like every army is hitting and winning on 2s or 3s with sustains, lethals, lance rerolls, or reroll 1s. Every game, especially casually, is just who can move their automatically hitting and winning big guns or swords first. Kill 500 to 700 points at a single activation, then win. The lethality is nuts. Resilient armies no longer exist. There is no agency. My weapons are bigger than yours. It's done. Adeptus Mechanicus, Sisters, Eldar, Tau, traditionally some of the biggest damage dealers, are at the top of the meta. Knights are big damage dealers. We need a major reset. And I think this is so funny because it is like it's such a juxtaposition to how we were looking at the game early on in Warhammer 40k, which was that if you weren't playing basically 2 or 3 factions, you had no output whatsoever. You could not kill anything. Nothing. Like, resilience was the name of the game. You were in a tank meta post Eldari and GSC nerfs. You basically were in this meta game where your big tanky boys could absorb 100% of your opponent's damage and, like, remain unbracketed and continuously push to victory. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. And I'm not necessarily sure that hasn't, that's like entirely gone away. I do think if we look at the grand tapestry of Warhammer 40k, 10th edition, even in its current state, is basically the least deadly edition of 40k we've ever seen, right? It's really easy to go do actions with utility units and have those units not die. If your positioning is good, if you have reactive effects, if you can cut lines of sight, then it's, in many cases, right? Like, you can have individual Space Marines who are obnoxious to kill. Well, this is basically the first time in the game, maybe since like late 9th or 8th edition, whenever it was. I think it was late 8th edition, like Armor of Contempt change, where they basically added AOC to every single Space Marine profile ever. Everything got permanent AOC all the time. It's like the first time in the game where like a tactical Marine defensive profile actually feels kind of obnoxious, right? You're like, well, I'm always in cover, basically, at least with like some of my models. So I'm mostly saving on 3s, maybe 4s, which is a coin flip, and a lot of like incoming weapons are either 1 damage or D3 damage. Their damage profiles are relatively low. So either you're dramatically overcommitting to kill what is otherwise not very exciting unit, or I just don't lose in that many models, right? Unless you're talking about units who are like fighting tooth and nail, right? And in that case, of course, I do think that it's not crazy to assume that it's not crazy to assume that your units are going to kill each other. However, the thing I notice here is that we're talking about casual play. And players who can move their big hit and wounded guns or swords first, you destroy your opponent immediately. And I think it points to the problem in that 40K's almost always had, where if we're talking about competitive play, and where we in the community here, generally speaking, I think I would say probably 90% of you, if I would hazard a guess, play in like chapter approved formats or WTC, and like play with prescriptive and pre-designed terrain layouts that match with the scenario that you're playing. They play out of the mission pack, so the missions aren't crazy, wonky, silly. And you have ways to protect yourself, right? You have line of sight blockers. You have relatively easy access to cover. You know where the lines are, and I think that changes the aspect of the game so much, because you can't avoid your opponent's alpha strike. And I think part of the issue that's probably being experienced in this case is that Warhammer 40K has never had a prescriptive terrain system built into its core rules. In fact, I was going through 8th edition rules for a video that may come out next week, maybe. But the 8th edition rules didn't even have terrain in the rulebook. It was in the advanced rules section. It would be like putting terrain where you put how modifiers work, how the PEMDAS like sequencing of different numerical modifiers work. It's like the equivalent of terrain being like relegated to the rules commentary. And that's so fucking nuts. And Warhammer 40K has done this for so long. And for a game, because it's the scale that it is, for a game that's so big with so many models on the table, right? It's like 30, 40 models. It loves to represent huge guns, anti-tank weapons, these things that are incredibly powerful. They can shoot a million miles, which not a lot of other games are really that interested in sort of quote unquote accurately representing. You can look at games like even like Marvel Crisis Protocol and like War Machine, skirmish level games. And a lot of times they restrict the ranges of those weapons to the point where it doesn't feel very realistic. But for game balance, it's much better. Warhammer 40K doesn't really do that. And in that environment, you have to have terrain rules that have been adequately designed, and 40K doesn't. And so this is an interesting discussion to me, because I think it points to the fact that the experience of myself and the player in this thread are very different. And it feels to me that part of the issue lies with the fact that there isn't a consistent experience surrounding terrain. And a lot of that goes back to like 40K's, inception as a game, where it was basically an RPG, where you wouldn't go to like D&D and be like, here's the only combat layout you're allowed to play on. But I do think to some extent, games or Warhammer 40K would benefit from a terrain system that's a little bit more unified, that makes terrain layouts more casually available to players who are not necessarily going to go dig into the chapter approved tournament guide in order to find terrain layouts that have been like balanced even a little bit. And it's the people who put like 5 little ruins on a table and they're like, that's terrain, let's go. And then they go first, and their, eradicator brick like piles out of a storm raven and kills your opponent's army. And you're like, okay, well, this was stupid. Why did we do this? Like, oh yeah, you should have a ruin that you can put your models behind so the eradicator brick can't see them. So It's interesting. It's a very interesting discussion thread. Now, I do think as well that there is a general outcry against rerolls. And this always is curious to me because I think that it's probably, it may be my psychology, I don't know. But I don't necessarily enjoy games that are super duper high variance, right? Where like a bunch of random shit can happen. And if you play Warhammer 40K without access to like any dice fixing whatsoever, it feels so much pure random. Fights just like if somebody spikes low or high on an attack roll, the fight's just like over and there's no way to like guarantee or mitigate that. And it also means that you create these situations where the baseline, like the statistics on a model's data sheet, like tend to play a much heavier part in how much damage they can do. And so you're just like comparing stat bricks against each other in a lot of ways. And so you don't get this like interesting combo play where you can assign a bunch of abilities to a unit and then make that unit do more than the sum of its parts. And it's so interesting. It's curious to me that a lot of people rail against the prevalence of rerolls in 40K. But in my opinion, they make 40K dramatically better. Warhammer 40K with no rerolls sucks. It's just like, it's awful. Sometimes you just like roll a bunch of ones and you're like, I lose now. And that just doesn't feel very good. So I don't know. That's an interesting sort of side thing for sure. Like every Green Knight detachment except Warpbane. Yeah, there's a reason Warpbane Task Force is the most widely played. Ooh, I wonder why. Is it because it rerolls? Let's read some comments. Obviously, this one was people got spicy in this thread, which honestly this isn't like a hugely inflammatory thread. I don't know. Like, I get it. It sounds like this person's like, I'm playing a lot of games and I feel like, I go up to my local game store and we set up terrain and then one player blasts the other player off the table and we call it a day. And I definitely understand that they could feel that way, right? And I understand that this like could be coming from a place of like saltiness, but it does not feel like an inflammatory topic. It's just a topic for discussion. It's like wild that people just like attack each other. Miggy Woo over here, I think, points out very appropriately. It's not a DPS race. It's a hammer versus anvil competition. Kill bricks are stupidly killy. But the prevalence of 4+ feel no pain, 4+ battle saves and feel no pains, often on the same unit, Ed, you fucking piece of shit, is equally disgusting. The Adrian follows up yesterday. My friend fielded 6 race to Technomancer with 2 Crypto Thralls, 4+ on the 4+ field no pain on the Techno, 5+ field no pain on everything else, 4+ invulnerable save on the Wraiths, 27 wounds, regens every turn. It's absurd. There's no reason any unit needs that many defensive buffs. Yeah, that's the interesting thing too. Is like every time there's always, I think both these players basically call out 2 of the greatest examples. There's so many examples of like when you're like, 40K is too killy. 10th edition's crazy because like you shoot at your opponent and they die. So it's like, it's way too easy to kill your opponent. And then you play against the army that is built around the defensive characteristics, like built in a defensive way. And you're like, wait, this sucks. Hold up. I'm no longer enjoying this. I think Wraith's a great example because you're like, I shoot the Wraiths. I do 6 damage. It gets reduced to 4 damage. It kills 1 1/3 Crypto Thralls. They reactive reanimate. The Crypto Thrall comes back. You do it again. You finally killed 1 non-Wraith unit, and that was like half of your army's shooting. And you're like, this sucks. Do not enjoy.
Ryan G donated $5 through Super Chat. According to the Ops sentiment, Tyranids should be a great faction without rerolls.
Yeah. Tyranids best army in the game. For sure. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Yeah, that's another interesting one too, because I do think that Tyranids fall into that category of for some reason my audio's borked. I don't know what's to do about that though. It's not working. One sec, chat. Sorry. I'm gonna try to see if I can fix that. I don't know what happened. Weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I do think to some extent Tyranids fall into that comparison where they don't do any damage, but they are defensively oriented, right? You're like Norn Emissaries, like 2+ save, access to like AOC sometimes, 5+ feel no pain, 16 wounds, like basically doesn't bracket. Like this is awkward. Sometimes you can heal them, oof. But it's also, I think it's emblematic of the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So like Tyranids can be this army that's really tanky. and it's possible and honestly, like I think advantageous to build Tyranids in a way where they're more defensively oriented than they are offensive, but it's also emblematic of like how shitty it is when you don't have any offense, right? When your AP values are low, your melee statistics aren't that great. You don't really have that capacity to like do these big alpha strikes, and you also don't have that much dice fixing. Obviously, that's changing a little bit with Subterranean Assault, but it's like they just spent like 80% of the edition being like just this like funny like random thing where you would just.
The upside of the game sucking
Hey-o,
eggs is you can stop caring about it being balanced and of fun anyway. This will never be a serious balanced game.
There is definitely a component of I think it's the super chat as well. Good kid, welcome in. How's it going? There's definitely a component as well of like. I think Joe likes to make this point on War Games Live, where like the problematic portions of the game from like a design standpoint are actually sometimes are beneficial to the community because like they do let you just like commiserate with each other a little bit, or you're like, yeah, I don't know, man, my stuff sucks or whatever, or like you're obviously clearly this rule's broken, or like the designers didn't intend this to be played this way, and I don't know. There's definitely some truth to that for sure. But I do think that it's pretty. I think that the thing the community wants to ask for balance is like that every single unit is equally viable, which I think is clearly never going to be the case, right? Like there's too many units, right? There's like 13, like over 1,000 data sheets or something. And there's always going to be like a meta game, right? Where the comparative weight of different styles of units always changes. And so I think the thing that people always ask for is that like, oh, how come I can't play like my mass tactical marine build and like be viable? And you're like, well, I'm not going to say tactical marines are bad. There are some circumstances in which they're good, but like it's, they aren't a unit that's designed for what's currently like to defeat what's currently good in other factions. And so I think people ask for the wrong thing when they ask for balance. And I think, when we are looking for balance, looking for each army having some number of playable, and unique archetypes with a little bit of personal identity in there, that's all we can really hope for. And that's what we have right now. So I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to the fact that like, oh, the game's like an unbalanced dumpster fire or whatever. Cause I do think that it's like, it is relatively balanced. I think that there definitely is like a good breadth of competitive factions right now, for sure. Matchups where you just lose but make sick side bets over beer or food. Yeah, I think that's also fair too, because there definitely are going to be skewed matchups, and for a single list format where you don't have any pregame control over your build, you can definitely you could definitely just run into situations where you're just going to die. And so I like finding the fun in those situations definitely is certainly healthy for sure. Anyway, let's keep reading. The competitive side of 40k has been leaning on rerolls and auto wins for several editions now. No matter how GW rewords or reworks shit, that portion of the player base will continue to optimize lists with these things in mind, and will result in power creep from Games Workshop, who can and the power creep from Games Workshop will continue over an edition's lifespan in attempts to balance the game. All it does is make later codexes stronger than early ones. It happens every time. Is that true? I don't think that's correct in this edition. I will say there is to some extent like later things being better than newer things, but we've seen so many codexes this edition drop to just being fucking trash. And part of it's that like they don't follow those philosophies where they have no rerolls, they have no combo effects, they have no ways to improve their output, and they just fall on their face. And I like Adeptus Mechanicus at release were like kind of like that, right? There's a bunch of examples where the codex was just like basically unplayable, and I think like to some extent even like Drukhari a little bit. Obviously, like the Spectacle of Spite stuff is good, and it's proving to be strong, but I don't know if there's really anything else going on in that faction. I think it's like even the most recent codex feels like pretty wildly underpowered when we're comparing it to other codexes. Oops, excuse me. Also, this guy's called Smell Your Dick, which I'm sure means that he is a font of wisdom. We should probably be listening to. So I think that's like a little bit of a misconception these days. See, Grey Knights. Yeah, Grey Knights are a good example as well. Grey Knights. We talked about Grey Knights basically being filled like they were written by an algorithm. Nukes for Nimbies. Oh, that's a good username. That's strong. I like that. 40k needs to kill the rerolls, all of them, every single reroll cut from the game, no exceptions, then starts to rebalance. Fuzzy V says kill off rerolls and mortal wounds. Feels like a race of who can do the most mortals. Brother, I don't think you really want that. I'm gonna level with you guys. I don't know if that's the game you want to play. I remember starkly back to my childhood playing like 4th edition, and like because we were all playing starter sets and bullshit, like because we were kids. A lot of the game was just rolling attacks into each other's tactical marines. And you got these situations where you're like, all right, my guy shoots you again, roll to hit, miss. All right, next turn. I'll shoot you again, roll to hit, roll to wound. You're like, I'm a 3-up save. Okay, you save. And it's just mind numbing. There's, you want to talk about a game that is flat and uninteresting, uninspiring. It's the game that doesn't have any like consistency to it, right? Your decisions as a player have very little effect in a game where you're just trying to filter all your attacks through like this 80% failure rate basically, and you're just playing pachinko at that point where you're like, I'll roll a bunch of attacks and see what happens, and if one of us gets screwed by dice, the game's over. I think that people would find that the game with literally no dice fixing of any kind is actually not that fun. And I definitely don't think that these people understand how integral rerolls are to 40k. Now, what I will say is I don't think you need rerolls in 40k if the combat system was different. I'm not like, I only think you should always reroll all the dice. Like, dice should 100% be not part of the game. But I do think that 40k's combat system as it stands, because each individual attack is such a massive failure rate, rerolls are basically reinserted to allow some interactions to be deterministic. However, if you have more units do a more average amount of damage more consistently over a longer period of time, you don't really need rerolls. Now suddenly the game becomes a little bit more consistent. And a lot of it's because like every single attack has 3 or 4 separate ways to fail, right? And you don't need that realistically. Some people are like, oh, how come we don't just get rid of ballistic skill? If you can reroll everything all the time and you have sustained hits and a million things, how come we don't just get rid of ballistic skill and just roll wound rolls? And you're like, well, maybe you should. I think people like a little bit of consistency, and hit rolls, in the current design of the game, do fun things where you can do sustained hits and extra effects on criticals and stuff like that. But it's not necessarily something that it can't be designed around in a different way. Take away charge rerolls. Yeah. yeah. Imagine just play without command reroll for a game and just like see how much you enjoy that game. Because I don't think you're actually gonna have that much fun. Try playing Tau without stealth suits. It's miserable. Yeah. You're just like rolling 4 ups and 3 ups everywhere. 3 plus to hit, no modifiers is the worst fucking feeling. Because you should get just about over half, right? The 2/3 of your hits. However, you so commonly like spike that lower third, and the whole math of the interaction just gets like thrown on its head. It's like wild. It feels. It's probably because it feels so bad to spike down into a below 50% chance to miss, but it feels like it has such a greater impact than other situations. Axel Adams coming in here, based 10th edition's pretty dang balanced, honestly. Only if you're playing top competitive, says Brother Man Carhu. Most codexes have god awful internal balance. Yeah, that is true. I wish that detachments were a little bit more balanced. I do like it when they go back to old detachments and like rework them or revise them. I think like Emperor's Shield's a really good example of that. Just like taking it, what it basically did was like it took a lot of the mechanics that First Company Task Force, one of the worst detachments in the entire game, had, and just like there's game design levers that you can pull a lot of times when you're like designing an ability, and there's so many of them in First Company Task Force where like they have the like Fury of the First, right? It's like +1 to hit. Lever if you're below starting strength. +1 to wound. Lever if you're below half strength. And then they just moved all of those up one level. It's +1 to hit, no reason required. Below starting strength, +1 to wound. Suddenly that stratagem went from being really situational at best, if not bad, to being good, if not really good. And it's like I same with like Scintillating Legion. They did that like a couple months ago, where they were like they took the best, the biggest strat and the most important strat in the detachment, the +2 strength and +1 AP strat, and they just reduced its cost by 1. And we're just like, you do no damage because this strat's too expensive. Just have more command points. You're like, okay, well, that was easy. Immediately, it took made people rethink the detachment. I do think to some extent it would be nice if they went back and redid that. But I also, I do think as well, like I was saying before, there's just so many data sheets in the game. It's hard to create a situation where like every single detachment, every single unit is like super viable. Because everything can kill everything, with how fast and lethal the game, with almost every army is now, 40k has turned into a game of chess, which is great for skill expression, but not great for having a fun time. I think people do have a fun time playing chess. I don't know. I'm not a chess player, but I'm pretty sure that those people exist. But also, I don't know if that's, like, again, I'm not sure that's the case. Everything can kill everything. I don't think that's even close to being true. You shoot a Land Raider with your Intercessor squad and tell me how much damage you did. It's probably 1. AdMech is traditionally the biggest damage dealer. Played AdMech since 8th edition. This is a pretty spicy take. Oh boy, do I have a video for this guy. We're going to talk about servo-focused auguries for a whole video, chat. Raise your hand in chat if you remember servo-focused auguries. What a fucking piece of shit ability that was. So I thought that was an interesting, a very interesting discussion thread. I don't know if we need to get too deep into it. I'm actually curious to see like where people start like fighting each other. I kind of want to find that, because again, I think it's a pretty, like, you're just like, it's mostly just an interesting discussion. Oh, here we go. Here's some OGs coming in to throw down some wisdom. This First Legion, Best Legion over here. Has experience that I don't even have. First Legion, Best Legion says, "Oh, honey, you must be new. You didn't play during 6th edition with Immortal Taudar blowing the 3/4 of your army off the table turn 1. No cover saves allowed, no line of sight required, being unable to hit them back on anything but 6s. Grey Knights in 5th edition, being able to take on literally every single army with extreme competence, except for demons. I played Grey Knights in 5th edition for a little bit. I think I played like 6 games. I was doing a thing. I was like just out of high school, and I was just when new armies would come out, I would buy them and I would paint them. I was a commission painter at the time, and I would flip them like part time, and I would flip them for profit. I'd like a little bit. I would make like $100 or something. But like I got to play the army for a while and then build it up and paint it, like put it in my portfolio, and then sell it off. So I played like 6 games with Grey Knights for like 2 weeks or something, and it was every game was like, here's my Terminators. I cast hammer hand 6 times, and then 1 Terminator kills your whole army. So we have fun yet? I'm going to shoot my side cannons. They shoot 1,000,000 times, and on rending, they killed Land Raiders, so that's cool. Wow. And I just I was just falling asleep playing the army. It was so fucking dumb. That was, I think, the first time I really played an army, and I was like, oh, like this is what true power is. I understand. I stopped playing it very quickly because I remember distinctly I played against a buddy of mine from like the LGS, who's a good player. He was like solid. He always like came in. He had good takes on stuff, and he had like interesting technology. He liked to play Blood Angels a lot, and he played Blood Angels, and he played this huge Terminator brick with a bunch of characters inside a Land Raider. And I shot the Land Raider with a purgation squad of side cannons, and it fucking straight up died. And that's not even like spiking dice. I was like, and then the guys inside got charged by my Terminators and immediately picked up because the Terminators, every single one of them did like instant death and ignored armor saves. And I was like, oh my God, dude, this is fucking wild. I killed like 1,300 points of a 2,000 point army in one turn. I was like, I'm not making any decisions that are causing me to win the game. I'm simply rolling attacks and my opponent's taking models off the table. This is horrible. Eldar in 7th edition goes so damn powerful they could take on 4,000 points with 2,000 win easily. During Space Marine Winter, I played Steve Pamprine. And I was playing Tyranids at the time, which were I was like, I felt very confident with them. I think if we were in a more reasonable meta game, I bet I could have like actually probably competed for top Tyranid. But they were not very good, I think, from a holistic standpoint. And he had played against them. He was playing Iron Hands, or no, Raven Guard Space Marines. And he basically like tabled my army in one turn. And he was like, oh, you want to play like, we'll do something fun about it. You want to play where like your guys can like reinforce, and we can like kind of like push how far the Space Marine army can go, because it's, you know, it is like super broken. But like maybe if you have literally unlimited Gene Stealers, like are you capable of beating it? And I was like, no. Why? And he's like, well, it seems fun. Why? I was like, you have Auspex Scan, bro. Like, you're gonna kill a unit, we'll be like, oh, let's reinforce it, and it comes out of reserve, and then you Auspex Scan and kill it immediately, which is basically like a movement phase Overwatch, which almost nobody else could do. Besides Space Marines, and Eldar had a version, and there were a couple. I think like Skitarii infantry could do it. And it was like, you would like kill a Hive Tyrant with bullet guns, and then the Hive Tyrant would like come back and then just get Auspex scanned and die again. I was like, this is pointless. Why are we doing this? You're just gonna shoot every unit off the table in one turn. The Screamer Ball reroll is 2+ invulnerable saves. You can only hit it on 6s. Hero Hammer with 9 named characters from 6 codexes that were essentially immortal. This edition's been pretty good with no clear Doom train list or codex defining it. It swung a lot. I can say I enjoy it for that. But don't you dare think this edition is lethal. Yeah. Yep. Indeed. No responses. It's fascinating. Yeah, in the grand scheme of 40K, this is almost the least lethal 40K has ever been. Potentially since like early editions where, like I talked about, you didn't have any like dice fixing or anything, and armor penetration values like largely didn't mean anything unless you were an anti-tank weapon. And so like every model was saving on 3s all the time forever. This edition is, I think, a vast improvement over those previous ones. Make Overwatch limited to charge phase again. Yeah, I don't disagree. I do not like Overwatch as a mechanic. I think I'm of the opinion that I think a lot of stuff that can interrupt your opponent's turn, should be relatively rare, and giving it like access in wide array to a bunch of armies is, I don't think necessarily that great, but it is what it is. All right, chat. I think that's an interesting discussion. Let's talk about something a little spicier. Let's talk about loaded dice. Everyone's favorite topic on the channel. Loaded dice, or trick dice. We're over to Warhammer Competitive because Virtual Elderberry 31, what a great username, is asking, I know that dice games sometimes players can spike rolls.
Get good.
It can also be
40K
really easy to
donated
blame dice when
$5
you're
through
losing.
Super Chat.
However, I've
Donating
been in a
5 just
few
because you
games
hate
that
on now as a
though,
mechanic
when
too.
opponents have had
That's it, that's the
consistently improbable rolls over and over. I recently played a game like this, and my opponent seemed to be spiking roll after roll after roll. I tried to remind myself that it's just dice, but also I understand probability. He ended up rolling 7 6s out of 10 on Overwatch. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that his dice were too hot. I was losing badly and didn't say anything. It was a friendly game, though, and we just laughed it off. In my memory, which is fallible, he rolled an inordinate amount of 6s in the game. At what point do you say something, even when your opponent is just seeming to have the hottest dice imaginable? I have been on the receiving end of this. My dice, I think, because I'm. It's funny because I just went on a rant about how much I appreciate like determinism in games, but I also play demons, which is just like fucking who knows, who knows what's gonna happen in most cases. And I've been on streaks where my units die immediately. My bloodthirsters keep dying to single activations from like 100-point units. And I've had turns where my army becomes functionally immortal and takes no damage and does 1,000,000 damage back. And I played against a player one time who he charged. This was this is like an extra, I think a little bit of an extra salty situation because he engaged. He didn't, I don't know if he necessarily understood the game state, because basically I was trying to like get a turn where I was going to activate. He was playing knights. I was able to shoot at him, keep him screened with Nurglings and stuff, so he couldn't shoot back at me because of Bellicor. And okay, good. Thank you for the second super chat, by the way, man. Apparently my audio screwed up and I'm not hearing super chats, which is unfortunate. So if they come up, then I might miss them. But yeah, if it's only 5 because I hit on Overwatch as a mechanic, yeah. I also think that like it's annoying to you that Overwatch it like unfairly promotes certain weapon keywords like torrent, where I don't know if like necessarily like having a unit that over like if all Overwatch is on 6s and it was a thing you could do if in like very specific situations, like, oh, I have an Oath of Moment targeted on you, or like I have a unit that has 1,000,000 attack volume, like, and like I'm gonna try to chip 1 wound off one guy. Okay, I get it. Or I have like, you know, some sort of dice fixing. And like, all right, so in those situations where it's either a last-ditch effort that I can use, or it's something I can play around. But when you have situations where the units are like designed specifically, or units that aren't even necessarily designed specifically to Overwatch, but weapons that are like, or like, I'm just gonna say Tauren weapons, which are just naturally good at Overwatch. And one of the benefits of playing the weapon, in addition to the fact that they automatically hit all their attacks, is that they also Overwatch 10 times better than everything else. I'm always like, do they need to do that? I don't know if they need to. I don't know if it should be baked into the design of the Arcane Vortex Infernal Master that he shoots you once on my turn and once on your turn, right? Like suddenly, instead of that guy becoming like this, like, you know, individual scary threat, now he's like this, has this extra ability tacked on. I don't know. It's a little bit weird. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like in a lot of cases, it has been accounted for in the design of a unit. And obviously that creates situations where Thousand Suns become like crazy good at Overwatch, and then they get nerfed 1,000,000 times, and that dude costs 150 points, and you know, your core army mechanic gets burnt down. You know, in some cases we could maybe have just nerfed his Overwatch and he would have been fine. Anyway, so I was telling a story about the dice, but I was playing against knights. I screened out the knight player. I shot at one of his units. I did pretty good damage with the Lord Change. And then I set up a situation the next turn where I was going to shoot him again, get in with some units, try to kill one of his knights, and then soak Canis Rex on the crackback on Ed. So basically Ed like just got in Canis Rex's face and was like, "Rah!" So my opponent rolls Canis Rex out. And in the wild thing is like, Canis Rex is one of the highest like individual damage output models in the game. But we were just talking about how silly the tankiness is in 10th edition 40k sometimes. Ed averages taking like 9 damage from him. Like, not even very many. And so, for those who don't know, by the way, Ed is the Edless Gift. A great and clean one. He's 20 wounds with a 4+ invulnerable save, 4+ no pain. So my opponent charges in Canis Rex. He rolls his hits. He rolls his wounds. I think he spiked a little bit low. He got like 3 wounds through. And then I picked up my dice, I rolled my saves, and at the same time, he had like turned around because somebody had like gotten his attention or something. And I waited for him to get back, and I was like, oh, I made all my saves. And he was like, what? That's crazy. And I will like mention, like, my dice were a little hot and his dice were pretty cold over the course of the game. But again, it's like big stompy monsters fighting big stompy robots, and the attack volume rolling is relatively low, right? The sample size of the game in terms of total dice rolls is low, and the attacks are generally high impact. So you get a lot more variance. And he was so upset that Canis Rex punched a Grand Clean one and didn't do any damage. And I was like, well, realistically, you don't even half kill me on this interaction. I hit you back for a bunch of damage, and then I probably shoot you to death or kill you with Bloodthirster. Like this, like, likely was going to happen. You not doing a lot of damage in this activation is not actually that transformative to the game. But he wouldn't hear it, and over the course of the game, eventually asked me to roll his dice, to which I said, of course. I don't give a shit what dice I'm rolling. Like, the dice is the dice. So unless you have been rolling dice that are disadvantageous for you all game, the variance should be identical in either case. And I think that's what should happen in this situation, right? And you can also play it off to your opponent. Like, and at the time in that game, I don't want to make my opponent sound like he was accusing me of cheating. He was very salty, I think, at the time. But because I was like so open and didn't really care about which dice I was rolling, I think he understood that like it was just a variance thing. And at the end of it, he actually apologized for making me use his dice. But I was like, it's fine. I totally understand. But you can play it off if you're playing like a game with your opponent, and the game's not like hyper controversial, like contentious or anything. And especially in this case, it sounds like, oh, I was like losing really badly. But my opponent's like rolling a bunch of sixes. Like sometimes it just happens, right? Sixes just come up. But you can also just be like, oh man, your dice are so good, my dice are so bad. Let me roll your dice. We'll see if that balances out. If your opponent balks at that, that's when you start to get worried about things, right? But if your opponent doesn't give a shit, obviously, like about you, interacting with their dice or like getting a close look at their dice, then obviously that's when like you start to ask yourself a question. I will certainly give the opponent the benefit of the doubt here, and I think that the variance just can happen in 40k. And sometimes you just get games where like the rolls are just fucking weird, dude. I had a game at one point where like over the first like half of the game, I was like at my average dice roll was like 2.2 on on a 1d6, which was incredible. But the that's just like how it goes sometimes. And if you and your opponent are in like a sort of a cordial like environment, then that shouldn't be that big of an issue. There are some people who don't like touching other people's game components because it could have like there could be a there may be a little germophobic or whatever. And hope if you have like hand sanitizer with you and you offer to hand sanitize your hands or something, I think that should be fine. I like to carry hand sanitizer in my backpack whenever I go to conventions, because a lot of times you're shaking hands with people and trading components and picking up each other's tape measures and stuff like that. It's just like cleanly. So I think that's the one like potential sort of counter argument that someone might not enjoy that. But I do think that if it's suspicion in your back of your head, you're probably wrong and you're probably overblowing it. But if you ask to use their dice and they don't give a shit, and you roll the dice and you look at the dice and it's fine, then I think you're good to go. And I think that's the appropriate response in that case. Because like sometimes you just roll 60% sixes. I don't know. It just happens. Had people used dice because they were rolling too badly. Indeed. Had a well-known player ask me if you could use his special fancy faction dice for his first turn roll and fate dice only. I said, sure, as long as I can roll them too. He ended up not using them. Interesting. I did have an experience one time. I posted this in the Discord. I think some people might remember this at the time because I was at a tournament. I was like live posting, and I was a person I was playing next to almost certainly had a loaded die. And I don't want to out them, but because they are still in the community, and I don't think that they do this anymore, to be clear. But almost certainly they had a loaded die, and I don't think they were using it. They lent it to a friend. A friend came up and asked them for like, oh, like, do you have the thing, basically, like it was a drug deal, and he gave them a die, and then the guy made like an improbable charge, and I was like, what's up with that? That's a trick dice. I don't think that they do that anymore, though, to be clear. It was also like an RTT, extremely low stakes. It was pretty wild. But yeah, I don't think that comes up very often. Fancy faction dice are definitely kind of a weird one too, though, because I think to some extent there might be some way that they can affect the balance of the die, but I think a lot of times those fancy faction dice are like really awkward to read too. And so that it kind of sounds like a situation as well where it could have just been like, if they get pushback, they don't use the die because some people like can't comprehend them, right? On the really fancy ones that have like custom pips or whatever. I don't know. Trick dice like the Sisters of Battle Army rule. Indeed. Yeah. I question my own dice all the time and even threaten them, says Kev the Jinx. It doesn't work and they still fail. Good advice from Glemma. You need to sit down with your dice after each game and explain to them that some will be benched until they behave better. It always works for me. I crushed mine in a vice, put them in a baggie, and then put that into the dice bag to remind the others what could happen. Yeah. You run them over with your card, you make the other dice watch. Yeah, BP 1815 here says you could just ask to use your dice. I rolled terribly the other day. My opponent was rolling 4, 5, 6 consistently with his dice. I rolled 1, 2, 3 with my own. He asked to use my dice instead of collecting all my dice from the dice tray, counting his dice and using his own. He rolled 5, 4, 5, 6 average with no ones on my own dice and feels bad. This is so commonly the experience that I've seen. Because you see this sometimes, like every once in a while this happens where it's just like, I'm rolling so bad. Can I use your dice? And your opponent goes, yeah, sure, man. And then you pick up the dice and you roll them and you're like, I still rolled bad. What the fuck? Absolutely how that works. The easiest way is when they roll a bunch of attacks and get a really good result and just say, you'll use their dice for the save roll. Fixed dice are exceedingly rare, but there are tons of low quality, unbalanced dice out there that can be pretty consistently good or bad. Yeah, I think that's like if anything, probably more the case. There might be dice that look fine on the outset, but they have bubbles in them. And honestly, like the player using them probably doesn't even know. This has got you covered, by the way. Also says very intelligently, lastly, we are wired to remember the critical moments and disregard the unimportant ones. Many people look at the pure average, and as soon as they over or underperform by 1 or 2, that seems unreasonable. The reality, I think is what they mean, is that the standard deviation swings that average by 3 or 4 successes in either direction. This is Lorik the Bear says this is the most critical takeaway here. I feel like I'm in the presence of an elder gamer. The fabled elder gamer. There have been solutions as well. When my dice go hot, I offer to allow my opponent to use them. It helps prevent suspicion. Yeah, that's good too. It's so funny. Like sometimes too, like I like to take pictures of my terrible dice rolls because I complain about them. I don't go to therapy, but I do complain about dice in my Discord. And so a lot of times I'll just have pictures of all the fucking horrible rolls I'll have over the course of the tournament. So when my opponent's like, man, you're rolling really good. I was like, not your last game. Check this out. You want to see me roll 7 ones? If you really feel your own dice are crappy, spend 30 minutes rolling batches and recording results. Like for statistical anomalies, I've thrown out a couple of dice bricks because they skewed very far into 1s and 2s. That's interesting, actually. I've never encountered a dice brick that skewed to 5s and 6s. I had one that matched my army that seemed to swing that way until someone else used them. They broke the magic. This is ages ago. I still have the dice, but they didn't seem to roll as hot. After you passed them around like some sort of trick. When I was using them when the Chaos Demons had been reintroduced into Fantasy, I was rolling so hot the Nurgle army is near unstoppable. It was way too much point and click, no strategy after 2 tournaments were retired, since it was a colossal field bed. I think too, if that was 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy, I think that was just Chaos Demons, right? wasn't that like the most broken codex or army book that game had like ever experienced? It let you move your opponent's units in a game where almost 100% of the strategy was extremely fine-tuned positioning on your big bricks of guys. Being able to just move your opponent's units around is like fucking insane. Well, I'll just give myself a flank on you. Why don't you just turn around and let me charge? Insane. Mine are conditional trick dice, hot on attacks, all ones on saves. Look at this for a trick. I'm about to take every single one of these bolter shots. Also was a Matt Ward army book. Crazy. I wonder if we could find like an article about that. Maybe. All right. So I have a it was called Demons of Chaos, right? Back in the day. Oh, chat, there's even a Reddit thread about it. What made 7th edition's 7th edition Warhammer Fantasies Demons of Chaos army so wildly overpowered? We're back in our Warhammer. This is amazing. I love that this is a thread from last year. Information on Fantasy's competitive scene isn't as easy to come by as 40Ks. But from what I've read, the 7th edition Demons of Chaos army book was infamous. The armies that were runner-ups for the best in the game didn't have any chance against demons. So what are all the things that made this army so powerful? What I've been able to gather is that a ward save for all units was a big deal since there was almost no way to get around those. Yeah, the interesting thing about Warhammer Fantasy as well is that there was an armor penetration rule, which if you are to relate it to current 40k mechanics was basically gave you a 1 point of AP. But otherwise, the only way to get AP values was to increase your strength characteristic, which in hindsight is like phenomenally bad design because it means that the weapons that are already wounding you more easily also do more to bypass your armor. So like strength was just broken, like the most broken stat. It gave you like plus to wound and plus AP. Like, why would we do both of those things? I don't know. It makes sense when you think about it in terms of the narrative that Warhammer Fantasy was trying to push, where you have like, oh, the big man swings the greatsword and it rips through your plate mail. Like, I get it, right? It's very evocative. But when you consider it from a game design standpoint, it's like incredibly dumb. It also means that you can't represent things like, without using like a bunch of special rules, you can't represent things like a very skilled opponent or a magical weapon that like can like bypass armor. There was an effect called Killing Blow, which was supposed to do that. But you know, you had to create a special rule for it. You couldn't just make it a stat. Bizarre, absolutely insane game design. But ward saves were just invulnerable saves. You could just take a ward save and it was fine. The Glean magic spell let you cast all your enemy wizard spells on targets of your choosing. They couldn't be dispelled. Everything caused fear or terror. And I was introduced to Warhammer Fantasy Battle by 8th edition rules, which from which I've read they nerfed fear effects. That said, even before that nerf, immune psychology across most of the army sounded like it did. Vampire counts good. What other aspects of the army made the army so broken? A lot of their weapons were powerful as well. They were a codex that was pretty much good at everything with no obvious weaknesses. They were a pain to play against. Good magic, good attacks, immune to psychology, word saves and everything. Great points efficiency. Classic Games Workshop power creep. Yeah, they're kind of towards the end of the edition, if I remember, in 7th. I thought it was last of submission. For some reason, I remember thinking Flamers were completely out of control. A friend of mine had Proxies as Zine Army when it first came out, and he ended up not doing it because it was just steamrolling everyone. Power Creep in 7th edition was pretty bad. It felt like each new army book was getting more and more ridiculous than the last. Demons was around the time I stopped playing, but I remember my opinion at the time, at least, is they were broken as all get out. This was a very it's an interesting piece of discussion as well, because I believe that this period in Warhammer's history was very transformative to how Warhammer and tabletop gaming in general for a really long time approached its balance. Because this was at the time that Warhammer, like Games Workshop, was this like hands-off, it had this hands-off approach to game balance, which is fucking wild when you think about it. Like, imagine creating a game and being like, I don't give a shit if it's bounced. Fuck you. Like, what? This is also at the same time where they were sending cease and desists to like fan forums and stuff. They were not a well-run company at 7th edition 40K or 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy. But the Warhammer Fantasy, I remember distinctly because I was playing Warhammer Fantasy pretty widely at the time. I was in high school, I think. And I like listened to all the podcasts and stuff because, like, man, the amount of time you have as a high school is crazy. And I remember very distinctly, like the discussions were that like this period of Warhammer's development, because Games Workshop had a totally hands-off approach, the competitive community had begun creating composition guidelines that would either award you additional points, like victory points during play for playing less powerful armies and units, or they would award you additional points during army building. So they would basically, they wouldn't like release their own points documents. Those were all still in the army books, but they would basically like, they would like self-govern the, or like after the fact, basically like try to points nerf the really strong stuff. And I think as well that this was the point at which the WTC, or it was AETC then, started. I don't know this for sure, but I think this is when it started mandating different factions for each player so that you couldn't duplicate demons a bunch of times. So you would, if you showed up with like demons or like the really powerful codex or army books, you would play with less points than the other players, and you also were limited to one of them per team. So a lot of it was like maneuvering your demon player around to get good matchups. And that's basically the reason that the WTC format, as we know it now in 40K, and I imagine in AOS, I actually don't know, exists the way it does, where instead of just trying to win games, you're trying to maneuver your strong armies within the team pairing process, which is like totally shaped how 40K team formats have been designed right now, which is interesting. There were huge FAQs that were made by players in tournaments, yeah, and that was part of the like. It was good, I think, for the most part, but part of the problem as well was that it was it changed from a tournament to tournament. Like sometimes you would just have a TO who like had a different opinion on the balance of the game, and so they would be like, "I'm making my own document," and then sometimes they would like their own missions and shit, and that was basically the way that things worked all the way up through like 8th edition 40K. 9th edition is really when Games Workshop was like, all right, guys, we're going to like actually balance the game and stuff, I guess. But all the way through like 8th edition, like every tournament you would go to played a different set of fucking like, FAQs and missions and things. So you would like look at competitive events and like event results and be like, that's a weird list. Why did that win? Well, it turns out he was playing 200 points up what the next tournament is playing, and also had like a very specific composition to play the mission structure, that like the custom missions that the TO had written. It's like, oh boy. And as fun as that is, and as cool as I think, as much as I believe that should exist in a bit of a more casual setting, I do think that it is compartmentalizing for the community, for an already relatively small community. For 40K and Warhammer in general is like the biggest out of miniature gaming, but it's still not that like huge. And if you compartmentalize everyone to playing different formats, then obviously like you're just splitting an already small group of people, which is not healthy in my opinion. That's why I like that Games Workshop came back in 9th and was like, all right, we're doing missions. We're doing terrain layouts now. Even if the 9th edition ones were bad, at least they were doing them. And so, yeah, it was a big leg up. And we're in a pretty okay spot now, I think. Getting better and better as we go. Let's talk about the big thing, the big topic for today. An amazing thread that Hippie Hunter sent me over the course of the weekend, or the course of the week, which was incredible. And it's such an interesting discussion. Now, I want to preface it by saying something very particular, which is that I think the OP, who's anonymous in this case because they've deleted their account, and also had a throwaway account to begin with. The OP in this particular thread, we're going to be very critical of them, but for reasons that will become obvious in a moment. But I also think that creating this thread to begin with is something to be lauded. And while I don't necessarily know if like it was a wholly necessary discussion to have with people, I do think that that's something that we should like approach with a little bit of credit to them, that they are trying to fix themselves. Now, what are they trying to fix, chat? Oh, just straight up cheating in their games of Warhammer 40K. So we're over in Warhammer Competitive again. The deleted OP account says, I recently noticed something. Did you recently notice it? Okay. About the way I play 40K that's been bothering me. During games, I'll sometimes pick up dice that shouldn't be counted, like rolling to hit on 5s and scooping up a 4 or 2. Or when I'm counting out attacks, I might grab 1 or 2 extra dice without really thinking about it. I don't think there was ever some grand plan, but looking back, I realize I've probably done this in most of my games. In my last match, it finally clicked what I was doing and made me feel pretty terrible. The worst part is that this isn't a tournament setting or against some strangers. It's with my friends, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. I guess it's a subconscious desire to do better, but I don't understand why I feel the need to beat people I actually enjoy playing with. I'm not proud of it, and I'm trying to figure out how to stop doing it, and how or if I should come clean to the people I play with. Has anyone else ever dealt with something like this? This thread's wild, chat. This is crazy. So first of all, person is recognizing that they understand what they're doing is wrong. That's great. I'm so proud of them. We're already one step in the process. The next step in the process is to stop doing it. Don't do it anymore. And it feels like that should probably be about as far as it goes. You are like, oh, I realized I was cheating, which is shocking to me, right? That's a wild thing to say. And it feels a little bit like they feel like they are, they feel bad that they have been, I don't want to even like sugarcoat it. It's not like misplaying or like misinterpreting rules or something like that. It's just straight up cheating. They feel bad that they've been cheating against their opponents. But I'm pretty sure they know why they're doing it. And it's so that they can get, an undeserved advantage in their games. And it does feel like a little bit of a, what's the word? Of a deflection that they hadn't thought about it and they finally clicked. I don't know. I think that you probably recognized that you're doing it. But I understand, but the fact that you're coming clean and asking for advice on how to stop it is, I think, at least to some extent, laudable. That said, this feels like the easiest situation in the world to to defeat, because you just don't do it anymore. You play by the rules of the game that everyone's agreed to play by. It seems like the simplest thing in the world. Staz211 says something similar. What do you mean you realize you've been cheating? I opened up this thread to expecting to read about someone who's been getting a rule wrong by mistake. I thought this was, when I read the title of the thread too, I thought exactly the same thing. This is just straight up premeditated cheating. Sex Reflex, who's probably incredibly good at stuff, says, I can't even comprehend this. If you need 5s to hit, you don't scoop up 3s and 4s. If you roll 3 attacks in a flamer, you don't roll 6 dice for the flamer. Sounds like one of my friends that's a certified klepto. He can't help himself to everyone else's stuff. Seek help. Yeah, and I do think that there is probably some sort of pathological effect to this, right? Where it's there's something that could be diagnosed here that's coming into play. Obviously, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to go into that, but or a psychologist. So, but that could certainly be something going on, right? If you are just incapable of identifying and confronting the problem yourself, then I think that you might need some professional help. But from the outside looking in, and maybe it's a little crass to say, but it feels like you just stopped doing it. Compulsive behavior is best deconstructed with a professional, not a rabble of Redditors. Yeah, especially Redditors, and especially like on the Warhammer subreddit. If you come clean about cheating, people would be like, "Great, good job, come and clean about cheating. We're very proud of you for that. Now go fucking die." They are quick to the trigger on cheating allegations. Think there's some value in recognizing that this isn't subconscious behavior. You've been deciding to do this. You're deciding to cheat. Now you're having a reckoning with that. If you want to stop, you should stop. I don't think I'd go to your friends and admit it. First, they probably already know. And second, if they don't, there's not a version of the conversation where you come off well trying to explain it. Particularly if you stick to the version of events you've presented here, where you try to absolve yourself. How do you stop? You just stop. And if you can't and it troubles you, then don't play. You can't trust yourself. I wish you luck. That feels pretty based, chat. The interesting component of this discussion is like coming clean to the friends about it, and part of it I think is that like, what is the context of like these friends? Are these like very close friends? Somebody I believe later in the thread, discusses about that. See if I can find the comment about it. I don't know if I can. Oh yeah. Or maybe I can't find the comment. But somebody had made the comment that like your friend group, if you play with them constantly, like consistently enough, probably already has an idea that this is occurring, right? Like sometimes, you do just like look at a saving throw and you're like, all right, well, I handed you 10 saves and you rolled 7 of them. That doesn't look like enough dice. What's going on? And they might be, too caught up or too, they don't want to come out and say it, but they might already sort of have an idea that this is going on. If you're playing that consistently with them, then I think discussing it's probably helpful. But if it's people who you don't like, if it's a huge group of people, like a big, huge play group or a local community that you're playing with, and I think just like making a conscious effort to stop is good. But I do think that to some extent there is, you don't even need to necessarily take culpability for it. Just be like, hey guys, I realized that when we played last week, I was like thinking back on an activation and I was like, oh, I rolled 3 last cans when I should have rolled 2. And like, if you guys could just like, double check my dice or whatever, like when I'm rolling in case I miscount dice or something, or you make an effort to like show your opponent that you're counting out the correct number of dice or something. I don't think you necessarily have to like, sort of martyr yourself in order to resolve the situation. The easiest thing in the world is just not to fucking cheat anymore. Which is wild. What an interesting discussion. This is how you end up wearing a GoPro body cam at tournaments. Bro, I thought about the TJ Lanigan situation as soon as I read this. Imagine if he had come out with this thread. Honestly, he would have looked a lot better than he did. I think, but I don't know. He's come out on the other side of the controversy. Definitely one of the most graceful cheating controversies I've ever seen. Somebody come out on the other side of. Like, there's cheating controversies where people just like get fucking dumpstered, but he, I don't know. He's kind of an expert in navigating the Reddit mob now. Noticed it in business. This is younger brother syndrome or runt syndrome. Your younger brother was always bullied by older brothers, as one does, so needed to scrap for any advantage you could to hold your own. Interesting. Yeah, I do. This does feel like something that if it's, I don't even know if it necessarily needs to be something that like is diagnosable, right? It does feel like something that someone would do. It would be a reflection of their out of game play, out of game conduct as well, right? Like this can't be the only venue in which someone scraps for an advantage. That's fascinating. This one's not locked as far as I know. No, you can comment on this one. It's just that the user deleted their account. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in this one, chat. What do people think? Is this a situation where you should go back to your community and be like, "Hey guys, here's what's up." Bella Huberty says definitely come clean. Feel like people deserve to know if they're playing against a player who has a history of playing dishonestly, so they can keep an eye out. Especially if it's something that you, what's the word? That they've like noticed, and you, if you can frame it in a way where you're like, hey, I'm like really trying to become better, I think people will be more likely to help you. But just being like, hey, heads up, guys, I've been cheating against you for the last 6 months. That's probably not going to come across well. Would it be considered cheating if you make your own 40k TTS mod that looks exactly like the normal one, but you change the scripts to give you an unfair advantage with dice and secondary draws? All right, Borja. there's a global ban list for T5ST, by the way, for my online tournament circuit, and there's only one name on it, and that's what got them on it, was creating their own dice roller that could roll whatever they wanted on specifically scripted dice. Fucking wild. That's yeah. They are not allowed in the server anymore. They weren't even discovered in a T5S2 event either, but we preemptively banned them permanently. Yeah, that really happened. That really happened for real. And they're just they're on there forever. So if you are running a T5S2 event, you are not allowed to submit to the rankings if that player participated in your event. So that's the rule. We've definitely dealt with like interesting situations, but nothing even remotely close to that ever at any other time. That's why you stay off TTS. That's a bad reason to stay off TTS. That guy's hit a lifetime ban. If that's your reason for not playing TTS, I think you have other reasons for not playing TTS, and we found a mistake. Pretty wild. Blood Principle thought you were original. Nope. People thought about that before. It is the weird thing about Tabletop Simulator being like so eminently moddable, and the fact that it uses, like I don't think that this necessarily happens, or it would be easy to do in like the, for example, like Marvel Crisis Protocol community, because the MCP TTS mod is like one like enormous mod. Hey Ryan, thank you for the super chat.
Ryan G donated $5 through Super Chat. Could we talk about the final round of WCW Day 1 being sweeping engage, supply drop? A lot of the frustration is from missions being blind going in.
The missions were blind going in. I did not even know that, chat. That's fascinating. I assumed, because I mean, we didn't, from the outside looking in, get the player packets, right? That had all the like the special rulings and stuff. I assumed that the players knew what the missions were. If the missions were blind and they were like, hey, we're playing Scorched Earth twice and fucking hidden supplies. Ugh. I do think that's almost worth a whole video by itself, because I do think like Scorched Earth, it creates some interesting situations. And I think the finals is a really good example of where Scorched Earth can be really fascinating, because it does require an extremely well thought out line of play to succeed going first in Scorched Earth. But it is possible. First in Hidden Supplies feels almost unwinnable. It's like just like so bad. It was blind.
Ryan G donated $2 through Super Chat.
No.
It was blind missions.
Wasn't Day 1. Yeah, I think you meant the final I think he meant day 3. Because it was round 1. Was it round? Oh, was it? No, it was definitely later in the tournament, right? It was the cut. It was like the cut to top bracket or something. It was crazy. Ran hidden supplies in GW6. Yeah. Yeah. The worst is like at least search and destroy. Like you don't just get blown out like really early, depending on the situation. But the Dawn of War aspect is wild. But I will say, so to some extent, to go back to my original point, we could talk about that. I think we're done talking about this cheating and thing. Just stop cheating and don't do it anymore. That would be my advice. It seems pretty straightforward. But discussing World Championships, I do feel in some way that there are reasons to include missions like supply drop in the format. Scorched Earth is like maybe defensible because you can sometimes win the opposite section if you're going first in like weird situations and when you play it super correctly. And Richard Siegler, I think, was definitely like part of the reason that he succeeded so well and is the world champion is that he did prepare to play on the disadvantaged side in those cases. And it was funny that a lot of people said, like I mentioned that he was disadvantaged in that case. And a lot of people criticized me for saying that, like, well, Adeptus Mechanicus is a positive Eldar matchup and is a really strong faction. And I agree, but I also think that in most cases, going first in that mission is just a fucking disaster, right? And I would, if you and your opponent have equal or even close to equal like power level and skill sets, I would expect 9 times out of 10 the second player to win that matchup, unless you're very prepared for it, which Richard was. So there is like this outlier where Scorched Earth can be acceptable. However, in my opinion, I don't know if necessarily that's like what you want to do in the World Championships. And the other thing is that supply drop is like that on fucking insane steroids. And like requiring that the second player basically takes one objective once per game to win is crazy. Like it's so crazy. And if you're the first player and you ever biff on your alpha strike or get down on attrition, it's immediately like unwinnable because all the second player has to do is roll it out till the final round. It's crazy. And then you're also like typically required, like you're forced to take these really aggressive plays that are not necessarily the correct, more reasonable play because your end of game is so disadvantaged. So in my opinion, the way that they had it set up was that they put hidden supplies on a long table edge deployment, which tends to advantage the first player because long table edge deployments are the chapter approved layouts are the most difficult to hide your army from. So generally speaking, the first player is going to get the alpha strike on you. So the rationale, as I imagine it to be, I don't know like what the TO team, was thinking about when they put that in the packet, is that you can balance the win rates by putting the game on a layout that wildly advantages the first player on a mission that wildly advantages the second player, and it comes down to like who plays that seat better. But it also means that like it puts an enormous amount of variance on who makes it to top cut. And for the World Championships, bro, I don't like that. They did that when I played at Nova as well. They had it on the it was like round it was 9 games and they had it on round 5, which I think was the cutoff to get to top bracket. And so it was the gateway to the top 16 was winning on hidden supplies. And unfortunately, what they did at that point was they played Hammer and Anvil on layout 1, which is like really, really a really like defensive layout where you don't have a lot of like turn 1 alpha strikes because your opponent can hide really well. And so that was just like a huge blowout, I think, in a lot of cases. You just rolled for second and then you just won the game. And that was like very unfortunate. And it speaks to me that there's maybe a little bit of a I don't know, like is there like a lack of understanding within the TO team for WCW or for these large events that do that? Or is the idea that if they introduce some of these more variance heavy missions into the format, the competition for world championship is more like wide open, I guess, because it's not purely skill and army composition based, because the missions are so strange. I don't know, but I don't, for my events, my hidden supplies isn't even in my randomizer. I don't even play it, and I don't play any of the long table edge deployments either. So if you're playing on my online events, I just don't roll those ones. Because I think that that's like a level of like weird variation that I'm not really comfortable with. People, I don't think it's useful. Like people will use Tabletop Simulator to prepare for, like, to prep their lists and to prepare for IRL competition, and I don't think that's necessarily like a combination of missions that people are really interested in, like that really like provides great results, because it's rare and also it's super duper high variance. It's wild. Hidden supply just needs to go away for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It being a horrible mission in the last stretch and being a hidden gotcha. Oh, and being hidden feels horrible for the people from coming from outside the US. Yeah, for sure. Siegler played Harpster on it. Yeah. Yeah, and that get like, I mean, I think Jax, they did a discussion with him. I think that game's on the Lavaz stream if you want to go watch it. But I remember watching that game when it happened, and like his Harpster was like, yeah, I don't know. This is already like a 30-70 matchup in Siegler's favor, because Sicarians are just really well suited to kill Celestian Sacrosancts, which was what most of what Jank's list was. And then I went first into the worst matchup for going first into. And so like he played really aggro to try to like maybe spike out the Iron Striders early and like maybe force engagement in the AdMech home. And it was just like he got one turn of scoring and then just got rolled. And honestly, that's most of the time that I see it, is because you have to play so aggressively in hidden supplies, you just like get rolled out. Really, you just play right into the second player's hands. And if you play passively, then you just lose by 5 at the end. So I don't know. It's like a catch-22. It's so bad. Supply drop should only reward 10 to 12 points for end of game instead of the full 15. I think the most interesting thing I've seen for supply drop is that final round, it scores at the end of both players' turns instead of just the first player. And then like you won't, it's like a big piece trade on the middle, right? Which I think is much more interesting. But I do like there's kind of not very difficult ways to fix those missions. I don't know if I necessarily like supply drop from the outset, because it's like a little bit variant anyway, because there's like some randomness to it. But Scorched Earth is like really easy to fix. You just don't let people burn objectives at the bottom of the game. It's stupid. It's like, why does it work that way? I don't know. Or you don't let people burn objectives and control them. I'll let them burn objectives at the end of the game. So if they go find a new objective and burn it. But the problem is that if you're going second in Scorched Earth, you can hold 2 objectives and 15 out the turn, which is incredibly, incredibly dumb. That's actually just points that the first player doesn't have access to. It's not that the first player can score them, it's just much more difficult. It's that they can't do that. They have no way to interact in that way. It's not fair for lists that have an advantage on those maps. It just means that any army that's built with an advantage on those types of maps couldn't play in the tournament. I'm interested in what you mean by that. I don't think that there's, so the only thing, if we're talking about like chapter approved maps in general, if you're going to World Championships, you already know that it's going to be chapter approved maps. So if you're not prepared for that, I don't know what to tell you. But the thing with the purely long table edge deployments is that the only, or like the most impactful benefit is simply that you can alpha your opponent immediately, which is something you can also do in other maps. There isn't like a huge implicit benefit to those layouts in particular, at least on chapter approved. Like in you know, it's essentially like if you have fast guns, you go from like already having a pretty good list archetype to just winning immediately if you go first, which I don't think is necessarily that great. And it's not like it's not an advantage you can use in other deployments as well. It's not like, oh, I built my army playing for the. It's like the chance that you roll naturally in the CA 2025 system, a long table edge deployment is like pretty low anyway. So I don't know. Or the long table edge specific maps, which is layout like 5, I think specifically. It's 2 out of like, or it's like 4 entries out of like 70. So it's like a 5% chance. Harpster saying he couldn't even make the game interesting to watch. Yeah. I don't know what you do with that for sure. Those kinds of missions make the list building and army selection the most important factor and negates decision making in the game, which is what people want to see. Yeah, I agree with that too. Like Alpha Strike stuff, right? Maybe it's personal bias, but I don't think that it's necessarily particularly healthy to incentivize armies to build into a way that Alpha Strikes. I think giving armies things, making armies do things on the top of turn 1 is important. But saying, hey, I'm going to be rewarded for the entire goal of my army being that I move and then shoot you like from my deployment zone to your deployment zone on the first turn. Like, I don't think that's necessarily super healthy. Because in a lot of situations, if you can't do that, then you get rolled out. And even if you can, then like, you know, what did we learn? You know, we've kind of wasted our time here. Hashtag Eldari. Well, I don't know. Eldari are different because a lot of times they don't engage you from like a million miles away, unless they're playing like the weird like Wave Serpent Dark Reaper brick. Like Eldar are always going to be able to do interesting things on turn 1 because they're just fast. But a lot of times they're engaging you from like 12 to 18 inches, which means that it's much less. It's in a lot of cases less about the particulars of the terrain layout and more about like. Or the particulars of terrain layout in your own deployment zone, and more about like terrain around the center of the table, right, where they can hide their Wave Serpent and then hop in and out of it. Whereas if you're being alpha striked on a long table edge, it's just about like, do I have terrain in my deployment zone? Yes, no. If I don't, I die. Which is not fun, you know. Nobody wants to get shot by a million Mont-Ka Riptide battlesuits or like Iron Shroud Balisari top of the first turn. You could do that in any map, but it has much less counterplay on those ones in particular. Player going first should choose which objective goes away in supply drop. Oh, that'd be cool. For sure. Layout 3 is fucked. Yeah. I mean, maybe. Layout 3 is definitely a little bit weird. I do think to some extent Layout 3 has like... There's more way to play around Layout 3, I think. Not in long table edge, or short table, like long table edge deployments. I think in like Search and Destroy, you can still get alpha'd, but a lot of times you can set up situations where your opponent has to move really far forward to attack you, and then you can counterattack. And I think that's much more interesting than just them being able to shoot you from their deployment zone. Like that's where I'm okay with people alpha striking each other, is when they actually have to like leave their own deployment zone and come across. And Layout 3 does have a little bit of that. It's not crazy, but it does exist. Alpha strike from your deployment zone, signed Monka. I don't know, man. Most of the Monka alphas I've seen, like you can put a Devilfish in their DZ on turn 1, but a lot of times what I see is like the Riptides just move 16 to shoot you from the tail edge of like their deployment zone. Like they toe the end of their deployment zone, they move a million inches, and then just tag you immediately. I played against Monka the other day, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was a Skyray actually, or it was a Skyray and a Riptide, because they got Strike Swift Fleet, so they scouted. And scout advance, move 20, shoot 48. Okay. You got me. Fair enough. Although my opponent rolled really bad, so I won anyway. But That is unfortunately how it works sometimes. One of the unique issues that was pointed out was that a lot of players who come from overseas wouldn't have showed if they knew supply drop was in the mission pack. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I mean, they will probably complain about it and maybe prep harder for it. I think a lot of it's that, like, can I construct a game plan, like, going first in this mission? And I think part of the issue being that you're on just like the alpha-iest of alpha deployment zones is like wild. But being I don't know if anyone's going to receive a golden ticket to World Championships and be like, well, I don't like that mission, so I'm not playing. You know, I don't know. But I definitely think it's shitty to drop something that's already so rarely played in tournaments anyway, which is especially Dawn of War deployments, which are relatively rare, and then also supply drop, and then also it's like a mission that nobody likes. Dropping that without letting players prep for it is like wild. For your premier tournament, that's crazy. First turn, your Storm Surge is towing your opponent's deployment zone. I'm gonna charge it then, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Scarbrand's gonna rip that thing a new one if you don't come to my deployment zone. Bring all your town my deployment zone, brother. We're having words that that Riptide and I. They pay for your flight, but that's it. Hotel, transportation, the event, food, all to the players. Yeah, but like it's the same as any tournament. Like outside of like, I guess the venue cost might be higher, and also like there might be a a difference in exchange rate. It's I can't imagine that it's that much more expensive than going to another large event that's outside your country. If your fares comped, right? So like if they pay for your flight, then it's like going to any other major or whatever, right? If I have to pay an $800 round trip and a hotel, and I want to play supply drop at the World Championships. And the context here isn't that it's like, oh, would you go to a major with supply drop? Answer, probably not. But if I had an invite to the World Championships, yeah, I'd go. Fuck it. Who cares? It's the fucking World Championships. How often do you get to the World Championships? There's one per year, and you might not qualify in the future. At least go the one time. If it's the decision between playing a major that doesn't have hidden supplies and the actual World Championships, would I make that decision? Like, would I choose this major? Almost certainly not. I don't know. That's a false dichotomy to each other. I don't understand that one. But it's also not. It's not the $800 round trip, right? If they buy your flight. I don't know 100% how it works. I don't know if there's like a stipend or something that you get for it, but if they pay for your transportation, it might actually be cheaper than to go to the other major where you might have to pay your own transportation and hotel room and go. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I think the mission. I don't know if the missions necessarily were like it. If you gave people the choice, right? I don't think the number of people that would have gone to World Championships would have been that different. But I do think that the results of World Championships could have been different if it didn't have so many random missions in it. And that's the real tragedy, right? Not that I want to throw any asterisks on Richard Ziegler, because I do think that he 100% deserves the win there. But there's going to be variance in any way in 40K in the results of a single 40K tournament. So, in this case, it just happened to be supply drop. But I do think that limiting the amount of variance should be on the TOs. And if, even if that makes the mission pack a little bit more boring, I think that's totally fine. They pay towards your flight, might not cover it all. If you want a US Open, you get your flight paid. Interesting. Well, cool. What was that buffing Cognis weapons? Yeah. Servo-focused auguries. Oh yeah, bro. I got a whole video recorded on it. I have a bunch of content that's recorded. I've been spending basically my whole week has been put towards making the new stream setup work. And I'm pretty close to like having it all ready to go for this weekend. But unfortunately that means that I just have this huge backlog of content that's like recorded and not edited that I haven't been able to upload yet. And I have a very cool video that talks a lot about servo focused auguries. That piece of shit that we can discuss. Anyway, chat. I think that's all the things that I had to talk about. And I think if we're just about wrapped up here, I think it's time to wrap up the show. I will be live later this evening. We're nailing down the exact time. It's going to be late, so probably between 8 and 9 p.m. usually, most likely. I'm going to be live with I'm a T-Rex, Kyle Follier. We are in a pod finals together, and I am playing Imperial Fists, and I don't remember what he's playing. But that's pretty interesting. Imperial Fists making it to the final round. Let's go. What a time. We've had some really crazy games, like super duper close ones, and ones that were blowouts, but not necessarily due to the mechanics involved. There's some interesting dice happening, I think, some of those games. But yeah, I think that's going to be fun. Ramp up for all the Imperial Fist stuff that I've been doing, and then we'll get to hop in to do something else. I do kind of have a little bit of a Tyranid bug, chat. And I'm almost like, because my streaming schedule is a little bit weird for the next month or so, I'm almost like, I wonder if I can find a GT I could go to. And I kind of want to just play Harry Danny in a GT. Could I do that? I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, chat, that's going to be it for me. Remember to keep it classy, folks. If you're happy wargaming, I'm gonna hop off, and I'll see you on Twitch later this evening. Cheers, everyone.